Chapter 12. Gerald Thornton prided himself on his conviction record and wore it like a badge of honor. He hid behind the mantra that he was determined to purge the streets of London of prostitutes, drug users, and anyone he deemed a menace to his beautiful city. His personal life, however, was in stark contrast to his public persona. His 3 ex-wives had each cited narcissism as the reason for their divorce. He controlled and manipulated every woman who entered his life. His last girlfriend had fled, taking their child with her after years of being his personal punching bag. There had never been any evidence against him, as he was an expert at twisting narratives, turning his victims into unstable, hysterical liars. She now lived in hiding under the protection of a non-profit domestic violence organization. He had scoured the country searching for her, but she remained beyond his reach, and that drove him nuts. The rumor mill whispered that his hatred for women was deeply rooted in his childhood. Raised by a single mother, embittered by her partner's abandonment, Gerald had suffered at her hands, the consequence of his father's actions. She had taken out all her frustrations on Gerald and struck him with both words and fists. Like father, like son, she often said. At 15, he ran away, and just like his father, never looked back. True to his mother's prophecy, he had become just like the man he despised. Though right now the person Gerald Thornton was obsessed with was Emmanuel King. Emmanuel was the only person who had ever truly bested him. He had blocked Gerald's entry into the Heavenly Gentleman Club, a club reserved for the elite who's who, with strict membership and a rigorous application process. Gerald had the money, the influence, the reputation, everything but Emmanuel's final approval. Gerald had already invited his legal peers to celebrate, only to be humiliated when the sign-off never came. He never could shake off the shame. From that night on, Emmanuel became his enemy, in and out of court. Few forces rival the vengeance of a bruised Gerald Thornton ego. Better still, Gerald knew exactly where Emmanuel's weakness lay: Lisa King and his clients. Gerald always seemed present whenever there was a charge brought against Lisa and any client Emmanuel represented. But Emmanuel was relentless, too relentless in his pursuit of justice for his clients. And today was one of those days, as Emmanuel stepped into the police station with his usual air of quiet confidence. The lady at the desk glanced up as he approached, her expression neutral but curious. "I'd like to speak to my client," he said, his voice smooth and steady. Angela Miles, the receptionist, was a young woman who had worked at the facility for 2 years. Once she had dreamed of being a police officer, but an injury to her Achilles heel had ended that ambition before it could fully take shape. Forced to settle for the next best thing, she now observed the endless flow of people with a mixture of cynicism and muted empathy. As Emmanuel stood before her, Angela found herself momentarily distracted by his presence. He oozed luxury and charm. His tailored jacket perfectly fitted his toned black skin, his grooming impeccable. Angela, like everyone else at the facility, knew him well. He never missed a visit to his wife, Lisa King. What baffled her and the rest of the staff was why. They seemed worlds apart. He was polished, poised, and successful. She battled demons that refused to let her go. Angela sighed inwardly and masked her curiosity behind a professional demeanor. "Who are you here to see, please?" she asked, as though she didn't already know the answer. "Lisa King," Emmanuel replied without hesitation. What on earth was he doing with Lisa King? The question tormented Angela and peppered her thoughts like an itch she couldn't scratch. "Take a seat, counsel. She'll be out soon," Angela said, her voice neutral. Emmanuel nodded and sat in the sparse waiting area. As he settled into the chair, his thoughts drifted to the memory of how Lisa had ended up back in jail. The memory was a bitter pill. "I'll be out with friends late tonight. Don't wait up for me," Lisa had said that evening, her voice steady but her eyes evasive. His heart clenched at the memory. "Oh, with whom?" he'd asked casually. You remember Evelyn, she replied, stealing a fleeting glance at him. She's clean now, longer than me, 3 months and counting. Is there a possibility you could be tempted? Emmanuel had asked, the question carrying the weight of unspoken fears. Nope, not a chance, Lisa had said, defiant. We just want to hang out. Emmanuel sighed inwardly. Remember what happened the last time you hung out together? He pressed, his voice gentle but firm. Why don't you wait for me? He added. We can do something fun. They'd been through this conversation countless times, and always they circled back to the same deadlock. He couldn't force her to choose differently. It had to come from her. Another time, she said coolly to him. Sure, no problem, he'd said finally. If you need me, call. She'd said nothing and closed the door behind her, but he'd known even then that he'd be hearing from her or the police. Emmanuel's thoughts were interrupted by Angela's voice. Counsel, we have Lisa King in room 4. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked into the cold, impersonal visitation room. The door clanged shut behind him. Lisa sat hunched in the corner, her slender frame bent. At 5'7", she had once turned heads with her striking figure and lustrous black hair. Now, her frail body seemed almost brittle, her hair dull, pulled back into a messy bun. The stench of unwashed days hung in the air, and guilt was etched into every line of her face. The moment their eyes met, she flinched, as though expecting judgment, to be berated because she deserved it. But it didn't come. Hey, Emmanuel greeted softly as he stepped towards her. He moved to kiss her cheek, but she recoiled. I don't want you to come near me, she said, her voice hollow as she retreated further into the corner. Her words were a shield, a futile attempt to push him away. Come here, darling, Emmanuel urged gently, his hands extended in invitation. She recoiled further and shook her head. Don't judge me. I never have, he replied softly. You need to forgive yourself. Lisa froze at his words. Why? Why do I have this problem? She asked. Her voice cracked as the dam of her emotions threatened to break. You can beat this addiction, Emmanuel said, but you have to trust me. And, more importantly, you have to believe that you can. I can't, she whispered. I have tried, she added. You can't trust me, or you can't trust yourself, he asked, leaning forward slightly. Both, she admitted, finally sinking into the chair opposite him. Her voice broke again. This has been my life for a long time. How do you think I can escape something that's had a hold on me for so long? His gaze locked on hers. Because you're stronger than you think, and because I love you. It's that simple. You're my wife, Lisa. I'm committed to you, and I believe in you. Her hands trembled as she itched for a fix. Can I have another lawyer? She asked distractedly, changing the subject. That's up to you, Emmanuel said evenly, but you know no one will fight harder for you than me. This isn't just a job, it's my life, and you are my life. Her hands curled into fists. Why wasn't he angry? Why didn't he shout, blame her, say something, anything to make this easier? Aren't you angry? She asked, almost daring him to say yes. No, Emmanuel replied, shaking his head. You owned up and apologized. That's enough. Her laugh was bitter, hollow. For the umpteenth time, yes, I apologized. How can you not hate me? Because I love you, Lisa. Always have, always will. I've put too much into us to hate you. I believe in you. Her hands flew to her face. Her fingers trembled as she wiped the tears that spilled over. You don't deserve this, she choked out. That's not for you to decide, he said gently. After a while, she met his gaze fully. I don't like what I've done to us, she said. I want to stop. I want to come home. Emmanuel reached out, placed his hands over hers, holding them tightly. "You will," he promised. "Trust me, we'll beat this. But before then, we have to get you out of here," he said, looking around the room. "So let us get through this, shall we?" She nodded. Emmanuel got his laptop out of his bag and at the same time said, "I'm going to go through some questions with you, the same that the prosecutor will ask. This is just to prep you for your day before the judge. Is that okay?" She nodded. "Okay, here goes." Emmanuel cleared his throat, then asked, "What were you doing when you were stopped?" "I was on a call." "Who are you calling?" "My husband." "And what happened?" "I was driving on the North Circular Road when I was pulled over and searched." "Did the officer give a reason?" "None. My car is insured with a valid MOT. I wasn't speeding." "Were you high at the time?" "No, I wasn't." "Where did he find the drugs?" "Under the seat." "Did you put them there?" "No." "Do you know who did?" "I have no idea." "Is the car yours?" "No, it belongs to a friend." "Did you search it before taking it?" She sighed. "Why on earth would I do that?" Emmanuel gave her a pointed look. "Stick to the facts and be polite." She nodded. "Okay." But something in her had shifted. Her shoulders had slowly sagged. Her voice had grown quieter. She stared at her hands for a long moment, thumbs circling one another, a nervous habit he'd only ever seen when she was trying desperately not to fall apart. Her earlier confidence drained from her like water slipping through cupped hands. Emmanuel noticed the change, but didn't say anything. They both sat in silence for a while. Then at last she spoke. "I'm sorry, Emmanuel." He looked at her. Lisa continued, "You have done more than anyone could ask for. You've been patient, kind, far beyond what I deserve. As much as this situation is unfair, I can't deny my part in it. I have failed you. I have messed up our lives with my addiction. But it will be different this time. This is the last time. I am committed to change." He took her hands in his, holding them gently. "I am committed to you. I made a vow before God the Father, and without a shadow of a doubt, you are my responsibility." She smiled, at the same time her eyes brimmed. "I dropped my phone into the toilet." Emmanuel raised an eyebrow. "On purpose?" She nodded. "I don't want any contact with those people anymore." Emmanuel exhaled. "I'm proud of you." At 10 o'clock the next morning, Emmanuel arrived at Lisa's court hearing. He was impeccably dressed in a black boss suit. His black leather loafers contrasted against the polished courtroom floor. Lisa's hearing, however, was an afterthought for the public. There was no media frenzy, no cameras flashed, no reporters hungrily shoved a microphone in her face to get a reaction for a headline. Unlike Rachael's case, the nation didn't care about Lisa. Gerald Thornton paraded his witnesses one by one. Evelyn, Lisa's friend, denied any connection to the drugs found in her vehicle. Her alleged dealer, who had already cut a deal with the prosecution, testified that he had sold the drugs to her. He avoided her gaze when giving his statement. "Don't blame me," he thought grimly. "Blame the system. Blame the people who run it." A prostitute took the stand and swore she used drugs with Lisa on the night of the arrest. Lisa wept in the dock. The weight of it all pressed down on her, suffocating. There was no way out. She glanced at Emmanuel. He didn't flinch, didn't move. She recognized that look. "It's not done yet." And indeed, he wasn't, as he tore through the witnesses' testimonies, exposed inconsistencies, contradictions, and outright lies. Soon enough, the verdict was left in the hands of the jury. 12 strangers tasked with deciding the course of her life, each with their own biases, thoughts, and stories. Lisa sat motionless at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly on her lap, fingernails dug into her skin. Her mouth was dry, her heartbeat a relentless drumbeat in her ears. The weight made her sick, literally. Her stomach twisted and churned, bile rising in her throat, but she forced herself to remain composed. Hours later, the door creaked open, the jury filed in, and hard as she tried, their faces were difficult to read. Lisa's entire body tensed. Emmanuel gave her a subtle nod. One hand rested lightly over hers for support. "Have you reached a verdict?" the judge asked. The foreman stood. A pause. "Then, we have, Your Honor." Lisa's breath caught in her throat, her vision blurred at the edges. "On the charge of possession, how do you find the defendant?" The courtroom held its breath. "Not guilty." The words rang through the room. For a moment, everything stilled. Lisa didn't react. She couldn't. She wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. It felt surreal, perhaps a mistake. She was too scared to breathe for fear that it would bring an alternative verdict she had been bracing herself for. Then came the explanation, a technicality. One piece of critical evidence had been mishandled and the chain of custody was broken. Some muttered that justice had been cheated. Emmanuel leaned in. "It's over. You're walking out of here." Lisa sank into her seat and sobbed, overwhelmed by how close she had come to losing everything again. A decision solidified in her mind. Never again. Emmanuel pulled her into a hug. "You're free, love," he whispered. He wiped her tears. "We've got the rest of our lives ahead of us." She nodded and still trembled from the adrenaline. He pulled back slightly, his tone shifting. "I need to go. We'll celebrate tonight." She smiled through her tears. As Emmanuel turned, Gerald Thornton approached. His expression was dark. "It's only a matter of time," he murmured. "I'll be back." Emmanuel gave him a slow, deliberate smile. "Keep trying your luck, Gerald," he replied. "You might even be Prime Minister one day." Later that evening, in Judge King's dining room, the sun sank behind the London skyline. Dinner had just been served. Lisa moved quietly around the table, straightening cutlery that didn't need straightening, her presence familiar. Emmanuel caught her eye for a moment. The faintest smile passed between them. Judge King glanced briefly at Lisa before turning back to Emmanuel. There was approval in his look, not just for what Emmanuel had done for his wife, but for his relentless pursuit. "You dismantled Thornton," Judge King said plainly, lifting his glass. "Cleanly, and without lowering yourself to his level." Emmanuel didn't respond. He felt Lisa's gaze on him, warm with pride, and nodded in response to the judge's statement. He then simply said, "Thanks, Judge." Then the judge looked at Emmanuel and spoke with a gravity that signaled the true reason for inviting him. "Edward asked specifically for you to defend Rachael Brown. What say you?" Judge King asked. Emmanuel grimaced. Emmanuel responded. "We both know it's the kind of case you thrive on, the whole world against one." Emmanuel smiled at his father. His features relaxed as he took the seat to the right side of the judge. "I am not too sure. My caseload is full," Emmanuel said. "We both know you'd lose sleep if you don't take this case. It's what you live for, and besides, Edward asked for you," the good judge pressed. "And why me? A man like Edward can get whoever he wants to represent Rachael," Emmanuel questioned. "Well, naturally, he wants the best advocate to defend her." The judge held his hands in the air and added, "He also asked, and I told him I'll do something about it." "Leave it with me," Emmanuel said after an afterthought. "I actually had a pro bono case dismissed, so I have space for one more. This would be a challenge, though." "I agree, but I have never known you to turn away anyone who comes to you for help," the judge responded. Emmanuel smiled. "Have I ever?" He loved Judge King, as he was fondly called by those who knew him well enough. It was to him he always went after the high of a win or the disappointment of a loss. It would be an understatement to say that both worked tirelessly for citizens who were downtrodden without hope of any legal reprieve. Their resources and pockets ran deep, as their foundation was funded by the thousands of people they had represented in the past. "What do you know about Rachael besides what is in the news?" he asked as he poured some water into his glass. "Rachael Brown is a friend of Edward's." "How did she get involved with the Hales in the first place?" Emmanuel queried. "Well, love," Judge King offered. Then he hesitated and added, "Edward's condition is very critical." Those simple words had an effect on Emmanuel, sending the water down his handmade suit. Emmanuel looked at what the water had done to his suit and shook his head. "Why did she do that to him in the first place?" Emmanuel asked. "I guess that's the question of the hour." They started eating in silence. Then Emmanuel asked the one question bugging him. Why would Edward go out of his way to look for the best representation for Rachael if she allegedly did that to him? The wise judge nodded in Lisa's direction and responded, "Well, love, they say love is a powerful drug." Emmanuel didn't answer. He reached for Lisa's hand and squeezed it. "Long ago, the Lord said to Israel, 'I have loved you, my people, with an everlasting love. With unfailing love I have drawn you to myself.' Jeremiah 31:3.